History in all its complexity. This is one of the better histories of the nuclear bombings of Japan that I've come across over the years, in that it isn't, "Hurrah, we didn't drop enough bombs on Japan." But it also isn't, "Nuclear weapons are an absolute abomination and their use made the term war crime seem like stealing a piece of gum." It was so much worse than that. The second, they're being closer to my own position on the matter, for what that's worth. Instead, Thomas takes pains to show the complex realities on both sides of the war, both in what the leaders at the time knew and in the various pressures each was facing in trying to lead nations during a war. This is a Western-based book, and thus ultimately comes down on the side of the deployment of these weapons being necessary, but Thomas really shows effort to show that at least some of the American leaders that ultimately selected the targets and ordered the strikes did at least attempt to consider other alternatives, but again, given their own intelligence estimates, planning, and pressures, ultimately concluded to issue the orders they did. One thing that becomes crystal clear when reading this text, however, is that while there may not have been, apparently clearly were not, actual communications regarding this between the governments, there absolutely were people, high-ranking people, on both sides that were seeking ways to avoid this fate. There were those on the American side high enough up to know what was being built in top secrecy but low enough to not be able to countermand the order to actually use them, that wanted to avoid civilian deaths at all costs, even if it meant not dropping these bombs at all. There were those on the Japanese side that were striving, as early as late 1944 in particular, to find some way to end the war and still allow Japan to retain its imperial system, or at bare minimum its emperor. Which, to be clear, despite the US insisting on unconditional surrender, was ultimately allowed. And yes, Thomas goes into detail here too about what the terms actually meant to both sides. Truly one of the better histories of the topic I've ever come across, and I'm glad I finally read this text on US Memorial Weekend 2025, as we begin to go through the 80th anniversary of many of the final events detailed in this book. Very much recommended.